Hello and welcome to Bulimia Sucks. I'm your host and thank you so much for listening. This is a platform for people to share relatable and uplifting and inspiring conversations based on an eating disorder. And episodes will include personal stories of where they are now and their difficult journeys, and then their steps taken into recovery. And then also we talk to professionals who work with people with eating disorders. And my audio book of Bulimia Sucks is now live on Audible and Amazon and iTunes. And if you'll be interested and would like a copy of this, then please email me at katehudsonhall@gmail.com and I can send you the code so you can download it for free. Now, the other thing is that I wanted to mention was that I've been very busy working on my eating disorders coloring books. Oh, I say it's been very exciting for me because they've been so therapeutic to make. I've loved it. So they are out on Amazon, and there's one for to help people with bulimia and anorexia and also binge eating. And then I've made one for anxiety. And they contain, on each page is a mandala, and then there is an inspiring quote. And then on the opposite page, there is a question about that quote and what you can learn from that quote and how it can help you forward in your journey. So they are all available on Amazon. So if you put my name into Amazon, they will all come up and you'll be able to find them. Now, I'm very excited today because we have a returning fabulous guest, and her name is Joanne Light. And Joanne is joined by her daughter, Emily Couture. Mm-hmm. And now, Joanne has been on our podcast before, as I said, and she joined episode 58. And Joanne has a doctorate in counseling and education, and she is certified in coaching and emotional intelligence training. After 30 years in education as a teacher, counselor, and higher education administrator, she decided to create a retirement career in coaching, working as a parent empowerment coach. Oh, fabulous. And Joanne works with families, helping them navigate through their daily parenting challenges. And she provides support to parents, enabling them to discover what they need to know and how they can get there. So it's very exciting to welcome Joanne back. And then also joining, like I said, her daughter, Emily. And Emily is also a health coach. Mm-hmm. So Emily's here today and trying to talk about their experience with eating disorders, which Emily had. So welcome to the two of you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, it's great. I'm so pleased that you could both come. Now, so where should we begin? So tell us, well, Emily, do you want to start off and talk about your experience with your eating disorder?
Sure, I'll try to condense it down because it's a long journey of my life, really. I'm 38, right? I'll be 39 in January.
Wow. Do you know, Mum?
Yeah, do the math. Really started when I was 15. So had just finished my freshman year of high school. It was my first time in a public school setting. And, I went away for my last summer of summer camp that year and kind of got a little bit more interested in, how can I eat a little healthier and start exercising. And it was kind of just let's experiment with this and see how it goes. And I lost some weight and came back from the summer and started getting very positive feedback and responses from people, right? As we do when we lose weight. And
Yes.
that was sort of the beginning. It began, I would say, probably a year or so of severely restricted eating, anorexia, and um, to the point where I lost my period. I wasn't getting my periods. I was definitely having physical symptoms. Um, and I was a very high achieving student, so just kind of part of our personalities, I guess, that kind of
A personality.
became, that obsessive thinking and
Perfectionism.
behavior. Yeah.
Perfectionism, yes.
So, that was sort of the first piece, and that it kind of naturally evolved into bulimia in terms of my body could no longer physically sustain what I was doing with the level of restriction. But at the time, I was not ready to kind of start to heal and relearn about my relationship with food.
So can I just jump in? So,
Sure.
so Joanne, so what do you remember of that time? Because that must have been so difficult for you.
It was. I don't think I knew that she had a problem, and we talked about the possibility of therapy, but seemed on the outside pretty happy. She had a boyfriend, she was doing really well in school, she had a lot of close friends, and everyone looked up to Em. And I did sneaky things like dump the full fat cottage cheese into the non fat cottage cheese container. I mean, I don't think I understood enough in those days, and I was fearful. I was very fearful and anxious about her, but wasn't quite sure what to do.
Did you approach her about it?
I think
There were
many times.
many instances of obviously concern from my parents, especially once I started to get to that point of really being underweight, as well as they saw how little I would eat. And for me, it was really, so this was dating back to so when I was in high school, it was late 90s into early 2000s, which was when that sort of low fat craze was
Yeah.
really at its height. So I just developed a terrible fear of fat, of dietary fat. So anything that I thought had any type of fat content, I could not. I
I
absolutely.
remember being like that. My mother
Yeah.
put
I
sugar
mean,
on some strawberries, and I was like, you don't really expect me to eat those now, do you?
yeah,
You know,
and
it's just sprinkling of like,
we once had a Thanksgiving, I remember, at our house with a lot of family friends, and my mom obviously was concerned that I wasn't going to eat anything. I think it was Thanksgiving. So she
be.
sauteed up some vegetables for me just so I would have that. But I was so furious because she made it with olive oil. And I was like, I can't eat that.
Yeah, it was really hard to come up with, and we made an appointment.
Therapy,
We went to
nutritionist.
therapy, nutritionist. I felt like I was trying, but Em wasn't ready. I think really the key to any issue anybody has that's a mental health issue, you have to want to get better. You have to acknowledge the problem and then make a decision and figure out a strategy.
Yeah, I was still very high functioning at this point.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Outwardly very had it together, right? That was kind of my
Go to.
my MO was put on a good show, make it all look good on the outside. Yeah, and at that point, I think I was kind of just it was a little bit of just adrenaline powering me through. I didn't necessarily, at that point, I didn't feel it, there was a period of the eating disorder where it almost felt easy, right? It felt very achievable, and I was kind of breezing through and being like, look at how I can do this. I can eat so little and still do all the things.
yeah, actually, yeah, absolutely. I remember feeling like that, thinking, oh yeah,
that,
I've got it all under control.
right, until it's not, right? And that for me was sort of when it naturally kind of evolved into a cycle of bulimia, which for me was largely periods of just restricting and then binging.
Yeah.
And for me, purging was just really hard. It like didn't work for me. So my cycle was more sort of like days of starvation and then binging and just going through that, which lasted for many years. So in college, my sophomore year of college, I had to leave school on a medical leave, and that's when I was hospitalized. Um, and that was kind of the first. I almost feel like it was the first step of recovery, because I think recovery from an eating disorder is really just ongoing forever. It's not something you kind of just, for many of us, I don't think you just kind of fix and move on. But that was at a point where I really was at a place of saying, I can't do this. I can't survive this anymore, and I can't do it by myself.
So
And
did you go to your parents, or Joanne, did you?
I did. At that point, I was away at school, so they weren't seeing me. I was extremely depressed. I was, in bed to the point of missing classes, which for me was like really, I was so debilitated, to not even be going to class, because I had, worked, I feel like my whole like academic life since I was young was really like pushing to achieve in school in order to go to a good school. And I went to this Ivy League school, and here I am, and I can't even, get up and go to class. So
Yeah.
at that point, the depression was really, really severe as well. So I actually, at that point, made a trip. My sister invited me out to visit her. She was in Chicago at the time, and I think that was when it kind of, I just let her know to what degree I was struggling, and she really helped say, like, we got to do this now. So at that point, that's when I called my parents, and um, they said, do you think you can finish the semester? It was November, and I said no. And after that, it was really like within a few days, I think I was in the hospital.
We brought you home,
Maryland.
and I had a nephew who, it's interesting that I have this nephew who's a doctor in Maryland, my sister's son, and we all, I think you were maybe 15. We went on a extended family vacation cruise with,
Yeah.
extended family, and I remember Jason, my nephew, coming to me right before we were leaving and coming home and saying, Em has an issue. You really got to take care of this. Don't let it go any longer. And, that was very scary that somebody was recognizing what was going on. And, so we plodded through and tried. But he then was the person I called when I saw that Em needed to come home. And there weren't a lot of programs at the time. I had done some research.
Less, yeah.
And now I think it's a growing,
Yeah.
there are many more programs, but this was what, 99 or 2000, 2001, I don't remember exactly.
Like 2003, maybe, yeah, because I was in college. But
yeah, and he said he knew somebody at Hopkins, so we flew him down and met with this woman doctor, and they admitted her for, I think, 6 weeks.
yeah, it was about 6 weeks that I was inpatient, I believe. Yeah.
And it was good that I had my nephew on hand, because, it's still, I had looked in Boston, and we had taken her. Remember when we used to go to groups in Cambridge?
Yeah.
When she was still in high school, John and I used to drive to Cambridge, drop her off, sit around and wait for her to come out of this group, because we heard that this was a very good group. Do you remember?
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely a lot of attempts on my parents' part for treatment and intervention and support. And, like you said, I think this goes along with anything, whether you're talking about, mental illness, addiction, eating disorders. Like, I was totally resistant. I wasn't ready. I wasn't, I think, ready to admit to myself or anyone that I couldn't kind of regain control of this and fix it, and kind of keep that image that I'd always have of kind of having it all together.
Yeah. So Joanne, can I ask you, so if you, what would you say to other parents that maybe have a child that has an eating disorder, and that child seems to be sort of quite, adamant that maybe they're in denial, or they're not ready to reach out for help?
I would just encourage them to continue to try and
Yeah.
bring in as many a professional that sort of appeals to your daughter or your son, because it happens that way too. I think I tried it, and we tried, I think, what we thought was best, but I know so much more now. So I would tell parents today that you just have to keep that connection, and maybe even insist on bringing in some help and talk about it more. Why, how do you feel about this? What are your friends saying to you about this? And just ask more questions and be more curious. I
Yeah.
think she seemed so good on the outside, as she said, that it was hard to point out to her, well, look what's happening, other than her, the weight and the control piece. But I just encourage parents to, you do the best you can.
Yeah. And I think it's really important that, if a parent is aware of their child, they think maybe they have an eating disorder, or they know, and the child is, in denial. I think it's important that the parent goes and, hops online and gets as much information as
Right.
possible about that, that eating disorder, or whatever, whatever the type of eating disorder they think it might be. So then they have the, the knowledge, or a bit of knowledge, to go to their child and start to open the, if they can, start to open the door and talk to them, and absolutely to keep talking to them. And
Yeah, and
eventually they will listen to one of those seeds that you've planted.
yeah, and I think to your point about coming from a place of curiosity and
Mm.
less, you're doing this, right? Like, because they would insist on something and I would just resist it.
Right.
And
just
that
should've-
just became its own kind of
Pattern.
cycle and pattern. And yeah, like I think everyone was doing the best they can, and we all do the best we can, and would do things differently if we were doing it again. But it was a hard situation to navigate. Like now that I'm a parent, it's hard to imagine. Um, but
Yeah.
I would say I'm very cognizant of how I speak about food and
Yeah.
our bodies, even to my children now who are 2 and 4.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
And that's something that I probably failed at, because I grew up with a lot of consciousness about quote unquote fat. I had an older sister who was overweight, and my mother was always nagging both my sisters, my older sisters, about weight. So I think I grew up, and Kate, I often say to parents now, you come to parenting and you swear you're not going to do what your mother did. But unconsciously, there are some things that just are there.
well, you're a product of your environment.
You're totally a product of your environment. So I don't think I ever said to Emily, "Oh my gosh, you're fat." But I think that there was some concern about body image, and it was rampant among my friends in the society, in the culture at the time.
Yeah.
Women who spent their lives working out. So I mean, this was part of the culture in which this all happened. And I think I did what I could at the time, but I certainly could have done more. I wish I had done more. But as I said, there wasn't as much information out there.
Yeah.
There wasn't as many professionals helping people through that. And I don't remember if I had a therapist at the time. I don't know if I was going to it yet, but I should have gone to a therapist and asked very specifically.
Absolutely.
I got you a therapist, though, whose specialty was eating.
Yeah, I still speak to her now. I spoke to her this week.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, we've maintained. She's known me since I was 15. So
because we made her go.
it eventually clicked to the point where I was like, yes, this is good.
Yeah, absolutely. But I remember when I had bulimia. So I just remember my mother one time coming and trying to talk to me about it. And I got so angry, and I was in complete denial. Not me, there's nothing wrong with me. I haven't just been in the bathroom. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And I was so angry about it. And then, then a number of years later, then she came again to me. And then, so eventually that seed did kind of fall into the place that it should be. And she did come to me again. And then eventually I said, okay, well, you can drag me to the doctors if you must. So it's perseverance, but yeah,
It's hard.
very hard, especially because this was in the 1800s. It was. So there was no help. There was hardly any help out there whatsoever. And all she had to base it on was Karen Carpenter, who died, didn't she? So until Princess Diana came out.
And I think something that, that I think is important now, there's starting to be more awareness and more information about sort of the breadth of eating disorders and diet culture and sort of how invasive and really how far reaching it is and how it's so ingrained in all of us. And I think the sort of a lot of the medical world is catching up. I mean, the fact that we still use BMI as a metric is really kind of insane.
Absolutely.
I don't know. I'm sure I would qualify on the BMI scale as definitely overweight, if not. No,
Yeah,
for my weight,
it's crazy.
It's just totally inaccurate,
off the charts.
and people, there's starting to be, I think, more awareness about the sort of health at every size movement and the recognition of fat phobia, and I think that's a really important part of this discussion too, because there is so much fat phobia in our culture, and now, just as there was then, and I think we're starting to name it and starting to recognize it, but you don't have to look like a starving little girl to have an eating disorder, right? Like, many people who are fat have eating disorders and also need support and help and treatment. And I think part of that is all of us getting a little bit more comfortable with this dialogue of understanding what fat phobia is and where it comes from, and that thin does not necessarily equal healthy, and the sort of ideals aesthetically that we've adopted as the beauty standard does not equate to health.
And I think there's still shame and stigma attached to fat.
Oh, hugely.
Yeah.
Hugely.
So and that just promotes unhealthy behaviors in so many people. Yeah, I think Em's right. I think it's a broader breadth of problems that you can have with your eating. The disordered eating is.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so once you went into the program,
Yep.
then how did you get on?
So it was a very important step, I think, primarily because it was the first time that I was sort of willing to say, let go of control and say, I need help with this. And I was about 19 at the time. I went back to school. I took the rest of the year off, went back to school the following year. And to be honest, I was still very much in the throes of that cycle of bulimia. It's not like I came out of the hospital and those behaviors stopped, right? That's just, I was in a completely different setting. I mean, when in this eating disorder unit, you literally, every meal was like, you were watched, you had to eat it, when you went to the bathroom was monitored, and I don't know how those programs work now.
Yeah,
I imagine that there would be much more kind of education about nutrition and how food is like used to fuel us, and sort of there wasn't a lot of that at the time. It was just more like, you need to eat this many calories and be weighed and sort of measure your progress, in addition to therapy and that sort of thing. But there's certainly many more years well into my mid to late 20s, I would say, where this was just like an ongoing evolution. And there would be periods of time where I felt more in control, and there would be periods of time where I felt less in control and more depressed, and it would have much more of an impact on my day to day life. But I think it's just, it's been like an evolution. It's not, it's very interesting. I had 3 back surgeries this summer, and
3? Oh my gosh.
I know, and was totally incapacitated and was in bed, and you're on all this medication and you have no appetite and you've just been through surgery. And like, as I just started to be able to get up, and I would see people and they would be like, wow, you look great. And it was like, like, that's the
Ugh.
natural instinct, is like, people are like, oh, you look so good. What? Because I lost 8 pounds or 10 pounds. Yeah, because I haven't been able to get up out of bed. There's just such this like ingrained insistence on like, losing weight is good, losing weight is good, losing weight is good. Um, anyways, I digress. But
What would you
um,
like to say to everybody about that?
I think so often it people are well intentioned, but sort of my perspective and what I would sort of share with clients or with peers or with friends is, there's really no need to comment on someone else's body, good or bad,
Yeah.
right? Like, it's probably not going to be useful. You have no idea what circumstances they're coming from or dealing with. Um, and it just, yeah, it's just not really useful. And there are plenty of ways to compliment people other than talking about their body, right?
Yeah.
Like, there are
Yeah.
so many ways that you can be gracious towards someone without being like, "Ooh, you look skinny," or like, "Wow."
Yeah. I think that's so important that people hear that, because you don't know people's circumstances, and you don't know, what they're feeling or what they're thinking about themselves. And it's better to find something else to positive to focus on.
Yeah, and it really reinforces like this notion of
That's
that skinny is better, that skinny is
Mm.
more valuable, that
Mm.
you as a human are more valued when you are smaller and look a certain way. I mean, to the point where, yeah, like I said, like, I'm almost 39. I've come so far in this recovery, but like, when people have been saying to me like, "Oh, you look so," it immediately sets me into this trail of
it's a
like,
trigger.
did I look bad before?
Mm.
Like,
Yeah.
am I better now? Should I work hard to stay looking like this versus what I
Mm.
looked like 6 months ago? And obviously that's not people's intention, but that is the sort of the message we're conveying is, you are better when you are smaller.
Yeah.
I think that's the same thing as these generational patterns that I always talk to parents about, that you have, there's stuff that's ingrained in you that you have to consciously really
Right.
work on to not have it just come out. It's very, so the parents who scream and yell at their kids and are so upset that their kids aren't listening to them, well, think about it. Maybe you never felt heard. So
Right.
this is what triggers you. So
Yes.
you have to define your triggers, and Em clearly knows that her triggers have to do with body image. So I
Yeah.
guess
And
that's
I think
good
that's,
you're aware of it.
but that's probably the same for many people that have been through an eating disorder.
Right.
Sure.
And it's an automatic reaction for people to say,
Right.
"Oh, look at you! You look like you've lost a few pounds," and then your whole mind can go whirling into negative thoughts and
Right.
battling with yourself.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah, and like, it's ongoing. I think um I probably felt the biggest shift um later in my 20s. I was starting to get more interested in nutrition. And that is when I was starting to kind of learn more and dived into this program at the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, and just, starting to, I think, better understand my relationship with food and how I was using food and you know, just better understanding how food is fuel. And like it had become such a, I had no ability to recognize my own body and my body saying I'm hungry, or like I had, it was all in my brain. I didn't know how
Yeah.
to do that in my body. So learning how to do that and become more aware of physically how foods made me feel or didn't feel, what it meant to be hungry versus tired or something like that, is when I started to be able to, I think, take further steps into healing.
Amazing. Amazing. And so where do you feel that you are now with regards to
Yeah, I mean, my feeling is,
patterns, the old patterns?
yeah, I think that I have the tools now. I think that those thoughts and feelings will still come up, much less so than they did, and also to a lesser degree in terms of, you know, I don't feel debilitated by like the shame of my body to the point where I can't leave the house, right? Like the intensity isn't there and the frequency isn't there, but I think also I now have the tools after so many years of therapy to be able to kind of better recognize when I'm falling into some of those thought patterns and, um, you know, how to just sort of talk to myself and reframe it. Yeah. And that's just a work in progress. I think that always will be a work in progress, but I also think setting boundaries with other people, right, is important.
Oh, very important.
And kind of being able to say, you know, thanks, I don't really need your input on what I'm eating. Or, you know,
I'm guilty of that sometimes.
I don't, you know, like I don't need your help picking something from the menu. Or, because sometimes we all fall into those old patterns, right? And it comes from a place of good intention, but, and, or saying to someone, you know, that's like, oh, you look so good. And it's like, oh, well, I don't feel good because I just had 3 surgeries. But, you know, just kind of like setting some of those boundaries with people. And I think for me, that's helpful as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so what would you say to somebody that has an eating disorder and is thinking about stepping onto that recovery path? What would you say to them to sort of help to guide them in that direction?
You know, I think that there is a lot of support now available. There are a lot of tools. I think there's a much better understanding. And I think that there's, you know, a little bit less of the stigma attached to it. I think it's a little bit more understood as, you know, kind of a mental illness the way that addiction would be. But yeah, there are a lot of resources and support. I think having trying to have some grace for yourself, which is hard for all of us,
And for your mother.
it's, you know, I think it's a long process
Absolutely.
and a
Yeah,
slow
a
process.
little kinder to your mother.
And an ongoing process. But I think also you have to start to unlearn things that you believe so that you can kind of relearn things. Like, I think for me, it's been really healing to kind of unlearn some of this culture and diet culture that we've just been like bombarded with our
Yeah.
whole lives, and unlearn this culture of like smaller is better, right? And like some of those sort of bigger ideas and structures in our society, I think understanding those, researching those things, for me has been helpful to kind of
Yeah.
understand where some of this stems from and to be able to then, you know, come back to myself and say, those things aren't true, right?
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. it's looking in depth into that and questioning what you're thinking.
And moms should do that. I advise moms to do that. Ask more questions of their
Right.
child.
And what do you think that they should ask?
Just ask how they are feeling about how they look. What are your friends saying to you about who you are? Or how does this make you feel? Do you feel really good? Or is there something I can do to help? I just think being curious and just listening.
Yeah.
So how was school today in terms of how you felt during the day? Talk about the feelings more and not be afraid. I think often I was afraid that she would get angry, and then there would be a whole angry thing, and that was not going to serve any of us very well. But maybe I should have risked more anger. I don't know, but just talk to your kids. That's all I keep telling people. You just have to keep connecting and reconnecting.
Yeah, and I think in asking the child, how could I help you?
Yep.
What would you like me to do? They're
And
probably
if they
saying, no,
don't
get
want
out.
any help, just keep asking, because somewhere down the road,
Yeah.
they will eventually, get to a point where they
Yeah.
will say, I get it. They're worried about me. What should I say? Just.
Yeah, like Em and I did. We got to that point and it was like, oh, okay then. Well, I think, well, for me, I allowed my mother, to drag me away to the doctor.
Well, and I think as the person going through it, knowing that those people will be there to support you when you are ready.
Yes. Yeah.
So to your point about like continuing to come back and kind of, I think it's really important to frame it as questions and how can I support you? How are you doing? How are you feeling? What is causing you stress and anxiety? And trying to better understand, and knowing that it's probably not going to be like a one and done type of conversation.
You just can't fix it. As parents, we try to fix everything. It's not such a great way to go about things. It doesn't.
Yeah.
Doesn't work.
Doesn't work. Yeah.
Yeah. And knowing, absolutely, that it's going to take some time to figure this out together of what would be, best for that individual.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. So now, is there anything else that either of you would like to add? So Em, so you are so you're taking some time off now from working. So you're working your other job.
Time off, you mean taking care of a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old? Then
Working your other job.
Yes. I'm not actively health coaching right now. I am a fitness instructor. I'm actually getting back to that now post-surgery in my recovery, but so I'm excited about that. I'm not actively working with clients, but I will start to do that again at some point. And, I just kind of like this discussion. I love talking with people, especially kind of one-on-one, who are going through this kind of wanting to be ready to relearn their relationship with food and to let go of some of their beliefs and this whole diet culture that we constantly live in. So that is what I love to do, and we'll get back to it at some point.
So if people wanted to come and find you, Instagram is the best place.
Yeah, for now, Instagram is great. My handle is Emily_sustainable_body. There's a lot of little kid content on there too, because it's all just one account. So, but and certainly if anyone had questions or wanted to connect more or follow up, I'm more than open to doing that if they want to reach out to me in that way.
Yeah. And so, Joanne, with regards to your work and helping parents with their children, how can people come and find you? Where's the best place?
Well, they certainly can go to my website, Joanne at joannehlight.com. I think I've sent you in the past, Kate, some of my other handles, but I'm open, especially on any issue. But if mothers are watching who have daughters or sons they're worried about, they should email me and I would get back to them right away. It's Joanne at joannehlight.com. I love to just personally answer emails, so that would be a good thing.
That would be amazing. Yeah, that would be fabulous. And we'll put all the links below anyway.
Okay.
So yeah, for both of you. So if anybody did want to contact either of you, that would be incredible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Happy to hear from people.
Yeah.
Just want to help.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us.
Thank
Thank
you
you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's just been, I know it'll be very helpful, valuable information that people can take away from this that are, maybe in the same situation or similar, or so thank you, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that's all for today's episode of Bulimia Sucks, and thank you to everybody for listening. And before we go, make sure that you subscribe to the podcast on Apple iTunes so you never miss an episode, and let us know what you think and show some love for your favorite podcast by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or iTunes or Spotify or Google Podcasts or wherever you listen. And as I mentioned earlier, check out my book, Bulimia Sucks, on Amazon to learn many different techniques to help you begin to break through your painful bulimic behaviors. And I love to hear what you think. So please leave me a review. So that's all for today's episode. And I look forward to chatting with you in the next episode.